All right, we're on part 2 of the reduce. And sorry for the late update. Fucking life happens, man. All right, so part 1, we talked about what reduce was. We talked about the initial value, the accumulator, second argument, all of that. Okay, now let's talk about its usage. Okay, now we have a catalog, which is an array of objects like this. What can we use reduce for? Okay, so first thing, let's say we want to find out what's the total price of all of these 3 items, right? Now, one way we can do that was with the map method, right? So you can say const total is equal to catalog.map, and then what are we gonna return? We're gonna return what? An array of their price, right? So we're gonna access the value, which is this object, and then we're gonna return value.price, like this. Okay? Because remember, map returns an array where the values of each of those indexes in that new array will depend on whatever you type here after the return arrow. Okay? So in this case, it's the prices. Let me console.log that. Okay. And then now, if we want to sum this, right, we can just do .reduce. Takes in 2 arguments, accumulator, initial value. And second argument, we want this to be a number, so we're going to put 0. And then, as I said, we're going to return accumulator plus initial value. Okay, we get 100, 20, 30, and 50. Okay, but you can actually do this without map. Let's see. So instead of .map, we can actually just do one loop and reduce. So we can reduce accumulator, initial value. Okay, what do we want? We want a number, right? All right. Okay, so what are we going to return from here? Well, remember, in the first iteration, accumulator is your initial value that you put, so 0. The initial value will be this whole object here. So we're going to return accumulator plus init, that's this object, dot price, which is the value right here. Act plus init dot price. Cool, right? We get 100. Now, what if instead of this, there's an array of prices. Let's say you have 1, 2, 3, and then let's just say this is 2, and let's say 1 and 1. So our sum would be 3, this is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, how can we do this with just reduce? Well, you actually need 2 loops, right? But you can actually do 2 reduces as well. So here, you can do const total is equal to catalog dot reduce. Okay, once again, accumulator, initial value. We want this to be a 0. Oops. There you go. Okay. Now, I'm going to do curly braces here. Okay. Now, what are we returning? Well, once again, returning accumulator, which is 0, plus what? Init. Init is this whole object. Dot price. Now, we can't just do this for this one because the prices itself is an array, right? But we can do dot price dot reduce again. Right? And now I'm just going to call the accumulator A and the init I. And second argument will still be 0. Okay. And then what are we going to return from here? Same thing. We're going to return A plus I. Okay. And then I'm going to console.log total. See, 10, right? So let's talk about this right here. First, it's going to grab the catalog array, which is this. It will loop through it. As it's looping through that, right, it's taking the accumulator, which first loop is 0, plus the price right here. But not just the price, it's going to reduce the price array as well. So this part inside will run first. And then the sum it gets, let's say 3, 4, 5, 6, then it will add it to the accumulator, which is 0. So the first loop, it will be 6. The second loop, the accumulator remembers, hey, my value is now 6, right? And then it's going to take that 6, which is now the accumulator, plus the sum of this array right here, which is just 2. So now we have 8, and then these, and so on. So we have 10. Correct. So see, if you do this without reduce, it's actually a lot messier. Now, underneath the hood, it's actually calling the same thing. It's just 2 for loops, and you're adding things, right? But in terms of syntax, this is a lot nicer to write. Okay. All right, let's see what else we can do with reduce. All right, guys, before we move any further, I want to talk about the relationship between these 3 methods, map, filter, and reduce. And if you didn't know, anything you can do with map and filter, you can actually just do with reduce. And I mean anything. The only reason why we use map and filter is because of syntax. For some really simple stuff, it's just better to use map and filter so that you can easily read the code and your team can easily read the code. But you can actually do the same thing with reduce. So let's do something. Now we want this catalog. We want another array where the name stays the same, but all of the prices are decreased by 1. Okay, so this will be 19, this will be 29, this will be 49, and so on. And I'll show you how to do that with map and then reduce. So let's go. Const new catalog. Let's do map first. Is equal to old catalog dot map, right? And then we get access to the item, and then we are going to return what? Well, we're going to return an object, right? Where the name is just item.name, but the price will be item.price. Ah, this new keyboard sucks. Item.price minus 1. Then console.log, new catalog. Let's see. Yep, 19, 29, and 49. Now, let's do that with reduce. Const new catalog 2 is equal to catalog.reduce. 2 arguments, accumulator, initial value. Okay, what about the second argument though? Well, the second argument, remember, is what you want, what type you want returned at the end. So our catalog is an array, so we want an array at the end. Okay, all right, and then let's see what we're gonna do here. We're gonna open this up. Okay, what are we returning? Well, we're gonna return, just like map, we're gonna return an object, right? Where the name is what? Name should be init.name. Not act.name, init.name, and I'll talk about why. And then price should be what? Should be init.price. Okay. And then log new catalog 2. Okay, now we don't get a whole array, we just get one object like this. Now take a second and think about why this happens. Well, to fix that, let's put an array right here, and I will explain why this fixes it as well. If you do a spread operator and then accumulator, let's see what we get. Okay, init.price minus 1. I forgot. There you go. Now, these are exactly the same. Let's talk about this return statement here and why we need the spread operator like this. Okay, reduce is a loop. As it's looping through this array, first loop, our accumulator here is an empty array. Okay, so on the first loop, it reads this line. It says return, hey, return an array, and inside that array, spread in the accumulator, which is also an array, and then put in this whole new object where you modify the price by subtracting 1. Okay. Now on the first loop, when you spread in an empty array like this, it does nothing. It just pushes in the object. Okay. On the second loop, the accumulator is now this object. Okay. And then the spread operator will help you push that object in, and also a new object on the second index gets pushed in. Okay. So that's why we need the spread operator. Because if not, we'll just end up with a single object like we had. Okay. So as you can see, map and reduce provided the same results here. But if you look at the code, it's way easier to understand for map, right? You don't need this spread act thing. All right, let's move on to filter. Okay, let's move on to filter. So let me review filter really fast. Filter is an array method. It returns a new array where the values of that new array is dependent on a condition that it checks. And if each of the array indexes passes that condition, that value will be included in the new array. If not, it won't be. So let's see. So we can do const filtered1 is equal to. So what do we want to do? Well, I want to filter this so that the new array only contains items with prices greater than $20. So this first item hat should be gone. We should only see the shirt and the watch. Let's do it with filter first. So we can do catalog.filter. We get access to the object. I'll call it item. And what are we returning? Well, we're returning all item objects where its .price property is greater than 0. Okay. And then I'm going to console.log filtered1. Yep, only shirt and watch. Now, how can we do this with reduce? It's a little more complicated, and I'll go slow and try to explain everything. Const filtered2 is equal to catalog.reduce. Once again, accumulator, initial value. What do we want as our second argument? Well, we want a new array, right? Because that's what filter does. It returns a new array. So array right here. And then what are we going to do here? Well, we can do a check if init.price. Because remember, on the first loop, the accumulator is your second argument. If you want to access the price, you have to go init, which is the object. Okay. Init.price is greater than 20. Then what? Well, then we're going to return an array where we spread in whatever the old accumulator was, right? And then we're also going to push it an object where the name is just init.name. And the price is just init.price. Okay, now when I console.log filter2, we're going to get an error. And then we're going to go over why. Console.log filter2. It says act is not iterable. What does that mean? Well, let's look. Reduce is a loop, right? First loop, the act is this empty array. Now, when we run, it checks, hey, is the init.price greater than 20? So on the first loop, init is this first object. Its price is not greater than 20. So this whole thing does not run. And if this whole thing does not run, there is no return statement. And in reduce, if there is no return statement, it cannot remember the accumulator for the second time it loops. So that's why we get an error. So what we can do is that if it fails this check, then just return an array where you spread in the accumulator. Let's see if it works now. Yeah, it works. So on the first loop, this check does not pass. So it just returns an empty array. Okay. Then on the second loop, it remembers, hey, I'm an empty array. So the fact that it remembers allows reduce to keep on going, right? And if you know ternary operators, we can actually make this even shorter. We can do a ternary return statement, return, and then what's our condition? Well, we're going to check if this is truthy. So if this is truthy, we're going to return this whole thing. And if not truthy, we're just going to return spreading in the accumulator. And let's see. Yep, we get the same thing. But once again, just like with math, let's look at this. This is way shorter and way more readable, right? This, it's kind of readable too, but it's a lot of stuff. Spread operators, ternaries, 2 return statements, right? So in this case, yes, please use filter. Okay? Reduce, you use when you're trying to do something complicated, like you have an array and you want to change it to an object, counting how many occurrences, things like that, which we will do next. Okay? But for anything simple, filter or map will suffice. Okay, let's move on to something more advanced.